Welcome back to Cindy's Library. I am Cindy, and today for Jane Austen July, let's talk about the doppelgangers in Jane Austen's works. So, what do I mean by doppelgangers? What I mean is sometimes the primary antagonist in Jane Austen is an older lady or gentleman, often one or the other. But sometimes there's an equal, or not equal, a secondary antagonist who is a young lady like our fair heroine, who may share some traits with our heroine, or may be completely different, but kind of blocks our heroine from her destiny. So let's take a look at these, shall we? So let me grab some of these. So start at the beginning. Northanger Abbey. And this one we have the fair, naive Catherine. Her first trip to Bath, and who becomes her bosom friend but Isabel. Now, to give Isabel what tiny credit she is due, she's not actually trying to steal Catherine's fated match, Henry Tilney, for herself. However, she is flirtatious, bit manipulative, treats lightly Catherine's opinions, and she's trying to get Catherine to go for her own brother John. Sister can't entirely blame her, except does she not know what kind of a guy her brother is? So, not a direct antagonist exactly, but yeah. Isabella is about everything that Catherine is not, and in this case, that's probably a good thing. Not that Isabella doesn't have her good points, she does, but okay, so we've got that one. Sense and Sensibility. This one we have the two Dashwood sisters, Eleanor and Marianne. And in this case, our antagonist, our doppelganger, I guess I should say, is fitted more towards Eleanor. I am, of course, talking about Lucy Steele. She is stylish. She does have an innocent way of acting. She's not beautiful, but she does look nice. And she captured Edward Ferras's heart 4 years ago and got him to propose to her, which means Eleanor doesn't have a chance. Now, all of this would be fair enough as far as it goes, except that Lucy figures out that Edward is no longer really in love with her, but he is in love with Eleanor, and so she has extracted from Eleanor a promise not to say anything about their secret engagement. Of course, she can poke Eleanor all the time, saying, "Oh, I got a letter from Edward," and things like that. Jealous nature. Not the best natured, no. She enjoys tormenting poor Eleanor, who for most of the book believes she doesn't have a chance with Edward because of his prior engagement. Pride and Prejudice. In this one, we have the Miss Bingleys. In particular, the younger one, I believe. I forget her name. Sister, of course, to the very affable Mr. Bingley, but she is not nearly as affable. Again, stylish. In her case, she has had an extremely complete education. And although her father, was it her grandfather, either way, a merchant, and so she is not of the same class, really, as Elizabeth Bennet et al. If anything, she acts more like the Bennet's class than they do. Trying a little hard, much. Can't entirely blame her for going after Mr. Darcy. He would be quite the catch. But, okay, next one. We have 3 more to go. Mansfield Park. This one we have Fanny Price, sent to her richer relatives to be raised from a young age, and the only one who has shown her any kindness is Edmund. Edmund Bertram. But then the Crawfords come into town, specifically Mary Crawford. She's gorgeous, she talks and acts perfectly, and Edmund falls for her hard, much to Fanny's private distress. In her case, though, she does deserve some more leniency. Fanny has made good and certain no one knows her true feelings for Edmund. And Mary Crawford, granted, she shows the most interest in Fanny after Fanny's cousins. Maria gets married and her sister goes with her to London, etc., leaving the Bertram household rather thin, and she doesn't really show much attention to Fanny till then. But still, I do think she does come to have a genuine affection, even if at least only a little, for Fanny. Of course, her moral judgment is much in question, which is Fanny's strongest suit. Emma. Emma is a very interesting one. In this case, I would almost say there are 2 doppelgangers for Emma. One is Miss Fairfax, sent away at a very young age because orphaned to be raised by richer relatives, though occasionally coming back to Highbury to visit her grandmother and aunt, who are both poor. She has few prospects, being raised as a governess, to be a governess eventually, since she has to earn her own way. Completely different from Emma Woodhouse, who basically has everything she could ever want materially and won't have to lift a finger to do actual work if she never wants to. Also completely different in personality. Miss Fairfax, she is extremely reserved. And so there is that. Whereas Emma, she makes friends pretty easily. We'll say that. And of course, at some point, because Mr. Knightley shows kindness to Miss Fairfax, there's some thought in at least a few people's minds, hey, maybe does he like Mrs. Fairfax. Emma doesn't believe it, though. The other doppelganger would be Mrs. Elton, who, after Emma refuses Mr. Elton, it goes to a resort, basically, meets people, meets Mrs. Elton, and they get married. So this is similar to Pride and Prejudice in that she's probably a lower class than Emma actually is, but because she married the vicar of Highbury, her status will be high because of that, and as a married woman, she thinks she should be higher than Emma. Yeah, they don't get along very well. And I can't entirely blame Emma because Mrs. Elton, she doesn't know how to take no for an answer, does she? Okay. In this persuasion, I would have to say the doppelganger for Anne Elliot would have to be Louisa Musgrove. Well, actually, we probably have two doppelgangers, one being Louisa Musgrove. So we have Anne Elliot, engaged to Captain Wentworth 8 years ago, but then broke it off at the advice of her friends. She's regretted it ever since. Fate puts Anne and Captain Wentworth back together again, but he is still resentful, and he shows a lot of interest in Louisa Musgrove, who's much younger, much more energetic, much more headstrong, as opposed to the reserved, careful Anne. Oh, I would also say, what is her name? Let me see. It is, it is her sister's friend. Let me see. Mrs. Clay, of course. She is widowed. She is Anne's elder sister's best friend. I think her name is Catherine. Catherine would rather have Mrs. Clay's company than Anne's. And we later learn there's some intrigue between Mrs. Clay and Mr. Elliot, Sir Walter's, Anne Elliot's father's heir, against Sir Walter. So, yeah. Louisa Musgrove is completely innocent in what she does. Mrs. Clay, not so much. There we have it. The doppelgangers of Jane Austen's novels, who are mostly very, very different from our main heroines, and sometimes more innocently, sometimes completely not innocently, in one way or another, get in the way of our heroines' happily ever after at the end. But fortunately, all of our heroines do have a happily ever after in spite of these minor or major obstacles. And Not sure Isabella Thorpe has much of a happily ever after. Uh, Miss Bingley, she still has a chance. Uh, Lucy Steele, well, she ends up married to Robert Ferris, but she gets all the money, so not sure she's too upset with things. Let's see. Mary Crawford. She could still have a happily ever after, but I'm not sure she is going to, unless she changes her ideas in a major way. Uh, Miss Fairfax, of course, she gets her happily ever after. Mrs. Elton, I suppose, is as happy as someone like her can be. Louisa Musgrove, I think, is going to be happy. Mrs. Clay, I'm not sure whether she's going to be happy or not. But such is life, the ups and downs, as Jane Austen knew very well and put in her stories. So, what do you think about the doppelgangers in Jane Austen's works? Have you been participating in Jane Austen July too? If so, how has it been going for you? Thank you so much for stopping by. I truly do appreciate it. So until next time, I hope we all stay safe and healthy. And as always, happy reading.